Hi guys. Today I sat down with a very dear friend of mine, someone that I've worked with since 2005. Mr. Philip Kunz is a leading industry expert and in many ways one of the elder statesmen of private banking here in Singapore. We sat down, we unraveled his story, how he came to prominence, growing up in Switzerland and Zurich before moving to London, before eventually embarking upon what has been a tremendous journey in Singapore. It was an absolute pleasure, and I hope you enjoyed the chat as much as I did. Cheers. Mr. Kunz, how are you?
Terrific. Top of the world. Delighted to be here with you, Paul.
It's so kind of you to join us. For those that don't know, we've known each other probably 17 and a half years, a long time, a long friendship, and it's one that I really appreciate. Can you be kind enough just to introduce to our audience, for those few that don't know you, who you are and a little bit about your background?
Delighted to do so. So yes, my name is Philip Kunz. I originally hail from Switzerland, actually a dual national. I was born in Canterbury, Kent, but my entire upbringing actually was in Switzerland, including the start of my career as a very young apprentice. I'm proudly here in Singapore, and I actually call it home, and have done so now for nearly the last 30 years.
Amazing. Yeah, a lot of people don't know about your UK heritage. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up in Switzerland.
Zurich is my hometown, the best town in Switzerland. Many will disagree, but I'm absolutely convinced. The beautiful lake, the river, the mountains that you get to see from the city center. And the good thing is, within the shortest time, you're up in the mountains, whether that's in summer, the hiking, or then, of course, the skiing in winter.
Yeah.
So,
it's beautiful.
It's fantastic.
The only thing about Switzerland is if you get a taxi, you almost need to take out a mortgage.
That's true. Very, very expensive. Having said that, here in Singapore, nothing is getting cheaper. If I compare what a taxi fare used to cost 30 years ago vis-a-vis today, a day and night, right? Very different.
Well, the price of cars, my friends back in Europe, when they buy a new car and they send me a picture, it just makes me want to cry.
Well,
you know
that
I mean?
is a very sad topic, right? Factor of 3, I guess you have to lay out here for the same car that you could get in Europe.
Yeah.
And the two of us loving cars, yes, that's a bit painful.
It's a challenge. Now, share with us, because you talk about having an apprenticeship, which I think is sadly missed these days. How did you decide to get into banking? Was there a natural calling, or what's the story?
More luck than anything else, Paul. Happy that actually somebody employed me. I had very different interests at a young age. A lot of people may know that. It was sports, football in particular. My grades were not very great, on the contrary. So after a long search, actually, I was very happy and very lucky to be taken in by a very, very small bank, 16 employees. That was the bank.
Wow.
But most probably what shaped my career from those very, very early days, it was a private bank, a very small boutique, client-centric private bank. And unlike apprenticeship at a larger institution, from day one, you get involved in all aspects, right? Rather than being rotated 3 months here, 3 months there. So really from day one. And so the practical application of your daily duties vis-a-vis classroom, more theory stuff, I think actually built the foundation of what was to come.
Yeah. I think that's so important, because when you think about it, nowadays, if you grow up in a private bank, you're segmented pretty much from day one, especially in a big bank. You got to see everything.
Look, it is very, very different, right? Twofold. First of all, the requirements are much, much tougher. I don't think I will get a job nowadays with my qualifications, Paul. Thank God nobody asks too much about it. So it's a concept that is extremely well established in Switzerland, Northern Europe more broadly. And so essentially it's a combination of theory through a commercial college, but 3 days a week you actually apply that. And so yes, this tiny little private bank even had a teller, a cashier, which I also had to learn. There's a little anecdote to that maybe later on. But very quickly then got the exposure to clients. How do you interact with them? How do you actually develop the skill of listening? And I think until today, that's one thing that sets a good private banker apart. from one another, the ability to listen, ask the right questions, don't interrupt, and then probe rather than just taking the first answer. So that was fantastic. But as many things in life, limited to 3 years. And I had the desire actually to go to England, where my parents had moved to. Interesting enough, they actually moved away from Switzerland on my very first day of the apprenticeship.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so what I believed to be a metropolitan city at the time, and maybe it is, full of temptation and going off the wrong way. Very disciplined. I did what I needed to do. But Paul, actually, the thing that kept me focused was the love of what I was doing from day one. And that fire within is still as strong and as hot as it was there. Essentially, what we do is an absolute privilege.
Yeah. Well, anyone that knows you, if they were to describe you, hardworking would be at the front of it, and you're a gentleman. And I mean that. No, I've never met anyone that has anything but wonderful things to say about you. I'm just curious, how did you learn that from childhood, from early leaders that you worked for?
For sure. We are formed in our early days. But that particular point, and this God's honest truth, God bless her soul, my mum said to me, and she knows nothing about banking, nothing about business. She said, Philip, I only have one piece of advice for you. Be a Swiss businessman and an English gentleman, and you'll do fine.
Beautiful.
And I've been trying to live up to that ever since.
Amazing. Great advice. So she was from the English side?
Yes, my mum was British and my dad the Swiss.
Okay.
Hence also my Swiss passport.
So when you arrived in the UK, when we had lunch last, the way that you described it to me, it was like something out of a novel, because the setup was at its infancy, right?
Yes. So private banking outside of Switzerland wasn't all that broadly offered. It wasn't all that well known. Most financial centers would have brokers, remisers, deposit taking. And yes, lo and behold, I arrived there having completed my apprenticeship. No money in my pocket after 3 months of touring the UK, going back to my roots, not wanting to live out of Dad's pocket. And we are now talking 1985, right? Deep recession. And one thing I can guarantee you, nobody was waiting for a Swiss apprentice in private banking. So you do what a young man does, right? I went to different search firms, but that was quite depressing, close to tears. And people who know the UK, London in particular, within this area called the Bank, there's this street called Threadneedle Street.
Yes.
It actually also is the domicile of the Bank of England. And at the very top of that was this Swiss bank. Unprepared as I was, I just walked in. And this proves you also need a lot of luck in life, right? You can be hardworking, you can be smart working, but you also need the element of luck. So I walked in there unannounced, spoke to the receptionist, a lovely, lovely lady who I'll never, ever forget. She actually got me an application form. I filled it out, and by the time I actually reached home, they called me and asked me to come in for an interview the next day. I then met somebody who I felt was a semi-god at the time, the branch manager. But he only had one question before he actually left the interview. Young man, so it shows you how long ago this was, where do you get this application form? Well, I walked up Threadneedle, I met Doris, I revealed her name, she gave me the form, and here I am. He then turned to the head of HR and says, get this guy a job, I like him. And he walked out. And I actually didn't see him for the next 2 years.
Wow.
He was such a senior. Now, this poor lady, having received instructions to place me, nearly tore out all her hair. Where the hell? Philip, I don't know where to place you. We have no private banking here. I don't know a Swiss apprenticeship. But then, I guess my first kiss of luck professionally, she put me in the cashier department. 7 ladies, myself. We were running this for about 3 months. Until the real beginning of my career as a private banker started. Somebody was sent across from Switzerland to set up the private bank of this Swiss organization. Again, hard to believe, 1985, in London, one of the major financial centers, no private banking.
Yeah.
But I was then given the opportunity. 5 years after that, I then did go back to Switzerland, catch up with my military service, etc., etc. But again, the exposure that I enjoyed, right? Essentially a startup private bank from scratch, doing absolutely everything. At one stage, I was a receptionist, the cashier. I held the keys to the vault. I did client acquisition, client advising. I also did street side trading.
Wow.
All the data input. So it was just amazing. I loved it. And it was also the cultural aspect to it, right? Having been brought up in the Swiss environment, re-exposed to England. And to be honest, I was missing that good old English gentleman that my mum used to refer to. Occasionally, you'd see somebody with an umbrella and a bowler hat, but mostly it actually didn't quite resemble what I thought maybe back in the 60s, right?
Yes.
A British gentleman, maybe very different than what I encountered. But it was an amazing time, but yes, I did have the urge to go back, find out what does it mean working at a headquarter of a very, very large organization, and then experiencing the next few years at this amazing place called Paradeplatz, right? Maybe one of the youngest ever to have a single office to my own, third floor overlooking the entirety of the Paradeplatz.
Amazing.
But maybe very important, I have always been blessed to have had good bosses. People who actually believed in me, gave me an opportunity, gave me room to prove myself. Something that I actually try to pass on to the next generation of younger bankers nowadays. So again, that element of luck, Paul, still remains important.
Well, the one thing with you is that, you refer to the word privilege and you're grateful. And I think there are a lot of people in our business, unfortunately, take, what we do a little bit for granted. And I think that's a refreshing way to view things.
So look, coming from humble backgrounds, dealing with money in the first place had a very, very different and important meaning to me. At times, I did not have two pennies to rub against each other. So the respect for money, maybe even more important, the respect on how to earn it, how to grow it, how to invest it, and maintain it, right, for generations to come. So I think that did make a difference. Without being unfair to the younger generation, because it is a very, very different world, right? The appreciation of money and the value of money is very different.
Yeah.
But maybe what helped me keep my feet firmly on the ground, right? I've always viewed money as a facilitator. It doesn't solve all problems. Sometimes you even think it brings you bigger problems. But it is a facilitator of aspirations, of dreams, whether it's for our children, the ability to send them to better schools and universities, having a nice holiday every now and again. So money alone doesn't make you happy.
Do you feel that your humble background and your view of life, as you just shared it, helps you connect with a lot of the clients, especially the first generation clients?
I think the answer to that one is yes, Paul, right? The respect for somebody again, I will use the word, I've been so privileged to meet such amazing individuals, entrepreneurs, captains of industry, matriarchs, patriarchs, building unbelievable enterprises from virtually nothing. So yes, that has always fascinated me. I was always very eager to understand their stories. And the best lessons to date have come from clients.
Well, I think they think differently, right? If you look at some of the tycoons, an interesting thing is since your time in Singapore, you've covered all the market geographies. So your audience has been as varied as they can be, right? Let's talk about that. How did you go from being in Switzerland to Singapore? What was that journey?
Again, somebody was willing to take a bet on me, right? Paul, I knew nothing about Singapore, even less about the rest of Asia. I actually had to look it up on the map where it was.
Yeah.
This little red dot, right, that has become our home that I love so much.
Yes.
So yes, there was a very, very steep learning curve. In the context of private, I knew no one. And again, here it was for a Swiss organization that I came out for. Again, no private banking. We only just started. Prior to that, like most others, actually there were representative offices trying to find clients out there who would be willing to consider parking their money, putting their money in Switzerland. Mm-hmm. It was only in the early 90s where that capability was built locally. And from that point onward, Paul, wow, what an amazing story this has been.
Yeah.
And the pace at which it has all happened. Yes, from time to time you hear people suggesting that Singapore is modeled off of Switzerland. And the proud Swiss that I am, I will still say today, in many aspects, I actually think Singapore has overtaken the original. Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating. So when you arrived, was it 97?
So that's when in the family, my maiden trip was in 1993.
Wow. So physically, Singapore looked completely different.
Yeah.
And what was the landscape of private banking? Was it literally at its infancy in Singapore?
It was literally at its infancy, right? All along, Singapore has attracted virtually everybody with name and rank in the industry.
Yeah.
You'd see a very typical pattern, especially of the foreign banks. They would actually first come out with their investment banks, their corporate banks, and then develop the private bank from there. And so exactly the same when I came out here. There was an investment bank of this organization. There was a tiny corporate bank there, but no private bank of size and meaning. And that's true for the entire industry. And that's where a huge element of pride comes into it. I do consider myself a little bit of a pioneer of those early days.
For sure.
Really kickstarting what is today such an amazing industry.
Yeah.
None of that could have been possible without the fantastic support that the regulator and Singapore Inc., as I affectionately refer to, supports.
Yes.
Business more general, but banking then in particular. And that combination of the regulator, its development board, and the industry collectively finding the best and most sustainable answer, in my humble opinion, is the main reason why Singapore has become what it is today.
Yeah, it really is. So your time originally in the UK and then going back to Switzerland, that was basically the blueprint for what you needed to set up here, right?
If you look for one common thread or red thread, right, throughout my career, it is the privilege of building.
Yeah.
Either something from scratch or something that was there, more meaningful, right? Because after that initial stint with the Swiss organization, I did something that's quite unusual for a Swiss who tend to stick with their own.
Yeah.
Maybe even a little bit snobbish. We think we are the best at it. But I did learn there are different versions to it, right? There are different approaches where you can be very, very successful in private banking.
Yes.
And today, there are different models. And so in my long career, and that now spans for 42 years, I have worked on very different platforms, on different models, participating in this private banking industry.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think when I look at some of the people that you have worked with and have brought across into Singapore from other countries, it's a who's who. You know, literally I could speak to any top tier person today and they will have some sort of connection with you in many ways. One of the things I wanted to find out about is when you came here, did you find that there was a different working style, you know, in Singapore vis-a-vis Switzerland and the UK? And then how did you deal with that adaptation?
So maybe that's why it was so easy for me and my family to assimilate here in Singapore and to call it home today, because there are so many similarities. Both nations are not overly blessed with raw materials, commodities. So from a very young age, you need to excel through education.
Yeah.
Right? You have to learn languages. Right? Who outside of Switzerland speaks Swiss German? Nobody is the answer, right? So, not that my English is any good, but from a very early day, you actually need to expose yourself to the world and learn different things, different cultures, different languages.
Yeah.
The work ethic is also extremely similar, right? Hardworking, dedicated, and that made the beginning that much easier, allowing me then to focus on creating, building, finding networks,
Yeah.
which ultimately then becomes the most important piece in a successful private banking career.
Yeah.
You're kind to say the who's who. I myself have been very privileged to have been guided, mentored, led by individuals. And I see it as my calling and as my purpose actually to pass that on to all future generations to come.
Which you do. I mean, I'm just curious, what are some of the key leadership qualities that you've observed, that you've really admired, that you try to build into your management style?
You see, I actually think everything is connected. What is important in your private life, what is important to be successful in sport is exactly the same in business.
Yeah.
And so I don't believe that there's two versions of a Philip, right? There's only one, and his totality. I think what people are looking for is that honesty, integrity, and most of all, Paul, trust.
Yes.
For the simple fact that we're all individuals from different backgrounds, different starting points, but we all have the same problems, the same headaches, the worries, the happiness, right? We have different backgrounds. Some of us are privileged to have been born into very wealthy families, and others are not. I've always tried to make sure, whether in my conversations with a driver, with a tea lady, or a chairman, I actually show them that respect.
Yeah.
Of course, your conversations or maybe the impact on your life and career is very different talking to a chairman or a leader vis-a-vis the tea lady, bracket, safe of her poisoning your tea. So I think it's that integrity, that honesty.
Yeah.
But what I try is actually to be authentic, to be myself, right? Be honest in your conversations, in your relationships. That then actually also allows you to have tough conversations. And helping somebody on or in their career is not always, right? Let me share an example. If I would wake up tomorrow morning and say, I want to be the president of Singapore, I would like you, my good friend, to say, Philip, that's never going to happen. But don't stop there. Give them hope by showing a different avenue. Have you thought of this, Philip? Very, very exciting. And by the way, I can help you on that journey.
Yeah.
So I do think people look for leaders that show those qualities. Yes, of course, everybody says, visions and strategies. I think, they are interchangeable. And they're not the most important elements too. Yes, hardworking, integrity, honesty. Whatever you do it with passion.
Yeah.
What you passionately love, you will do well. So I think most people are looking for somebody to help them identify what does that passion mean for them. What is that love that they're looking for?
Yeah.
And how can they best go about pursuing that?
You know, one of the interesting things is you and I are old school in this sense that we can obviously have a great conversation over the phone, because a lot of people just WhatsApp each other now. But you'll always make the effort to sit down and meet for a coffee and sit down in person and have a chat, because I think that's something that's massively overlooked, right? Especially nowadays where people work from home a lot.
So let me expand a little bit. So all businesses are people businesses, right? But most probably none more so than private banking.
Yeah.
It's all about people. So no matter how busy you are, right? Find that time and dedicate that time to the individual whom you're reaching out to, or vice versa. make them feel that in that moment, they are the focus, they are the center of, right? Put your modern gadgets aside.
Yeah.
And nothing beats a face-to-face conversation, whether that's building relationships with prospects, right, with existing clients, whether in your family. Right? The worst thing, you come home, right, your head is still full of your business activity. Yeah. The daughter has a simple question and you're not even really listening. Same in your business environment, right?
Yeah.
Make that person feel special. The next 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 1 hour, I'm only here to listen to you and see how I can help you. I think that is what most people are hoping for. It's not always well practiced, right? Let's not glorify. Time pressure, in particular, the further up the ladder you go, becomes immense.
Yeah.
And it's difficult actually to carve out that time. Constantly you see yourself in meetings, back to back, and that is where you need to create that discipline. And the only way to do it, and that's something I've been living by, you need to genuinely care, right? If you ask me, what is your management style, Philip? What is your leadership? I'm not even sure whether it's an official theory or methodology. I call it a leading by observation. Well, you can only do that, and you can only see things if you truly care. I can walk the floor and I can see whether somebody has a good or a bad day. I would know the families of the colleagues that are in the office with me. So it's that genuine respect and care for the individual that actually allows you to operate like that. And by the way, it has a lot of very positive side effects. Your best risk manager is actually knowing your people.
Yeah. You know what's interesting is when we first met, I was kind of in my late 20s. I think I was 27, 28, something like that. And that didn't matter to you, right? And we sat down and why I say that's important is because when I've dealt with a lot of senior people, sometimes you have to prove yourself to them. And I didn't get that feeling with you at all. You know, you welcomed me having a call with you. We had a coffee and we became friends. And it's unusual.
Absolutely. Look, and that was one of those crucial moments in my career, having met you and you leading me on the path of actually, again, doing something very different on a very different platform that I had before, giving me the courage to venture out. Specific to your question, again, it comes back to the same principle, right? It doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, where you come from. You're an individual who has the same fears and worries as everyone else.
For sure.
And it is in these conversations where you learn so much. And maybe digressing a little bit here and going to my sporting days.
Yeah.
Right?
What position did you play, by the way? What was your main position?
Over the years, actually, virtually everyone, save of goalkeeper. But also there, right, you need a combination of talent. You need a combination of age, which is expressed in experience. You can't win with only strikers. But also the whole concept of team and teamwork. I think that is where I really learned the basis of how to actually interact with a group of people, share common goals and aspirations, how to achieve them, and how to help out your colleagues. And sometimes these colleagues are competitors, right?
Yeah.
You have 11 in the starting squad. They're 22 fighting for exactly the same.
Yeah.
There are people that you may not necessarily be fully aligned with. But during that 90 minutes of play, you are one.
You're a unit.
And so very similar, right, in business.
Well, what I find interesting, because a lot of CEOs rule by divide and conquer, which I understand, and we understand the politics. I've always subscribed to a rising tide raises all ships. So if you've got Ronaldo and Messi playing on the same team, they should be working together, right?
Correct. And you do need a very strong coach to manage both of them. They will have their own egos, their own... Sorry. But yes, trying to assemble the best of the best.
So you've worked with some fantastic bankers. What would you say are the key things, the key ingredients to make a really great banker?
Yeah. So again, without being too philosophical about it, right?
Yeah.
I truly, truly believe you need to love passionately what you do. In private banking, maybe 3 or 4 elements. Loving people, right? Really liking being around people, interacting with people is very helpful. And that's true internally and externally. Love markets. Be fascinated by them, right?
Yeah.
Global markets, the way that they interact with one another. Love products and solutions. Combine all of those elements. How can I actually now put something together that will help you, i.e. the client, to fulfill his or her financial aspiration, right? You do need to develop the skill sets, the technical, but actually the far more important piece here is the skill to listen and to gain somebody's trust. Very often, Paul, at the outset, it's a complete stranger.
Yeah.
So again, you imagine, here comes this youngster from Switzerland, my first trip into Indonesia, an amazing market in its own right? Why should they listen to me?
Yeah.
Right? You're barely 20 years old.
Yes.
Well, at the time, 25, right? And then you want to talk about cycles. You want to talk about how credible are you if you can't underpin it with the knowledge that you've actually gained.
Yeah.
So it is a combination of multiple skills. Being an outgoing person most probably helps.
Would you say you're an extrovert or an introvert?
I think I have a bit of both.
Yeah.
I do like moments where I'm completely on my own,
Yeah.
focusing on be it a strategy or something else. But then I also like very much the social moments, whether these are the large events that we normally run, or whether it's an intimate one-on-one, or being in a family session, a setting, trying to find answers for them, right, to the challenges of multi-generational questions. And so again, the ability to interact with people from all walks of life.
Yeah.
I think that's very, very important.
Well, sorry to interrupt you. One of the things that, unless people know your very storied career intimately, you've covered markets like Indonesia, Malaysia, all Southeast Asian markets, Australia, NRI, and a lot of those markets are very nuanced. And I always feel that it takes years to intricately understand those markets. Because think about how many hundreds of times you've been to Indonesia. It doesn't happen overnight. But how did you deal with that challenge? Because each market has its own nuances, right?
So, yes, indeed. And I'll use the word again. I have been privileged. In the very early days, I also covered European markets, Turkey, Israel, Greece.
Wow.
But one of my very early bosses, he covered Brazil, right? So, yes, this global exposure, nothing has been more meaningful for me than though discovering Asia, right? Anything from Japan, China, Taiwan, all the way down to Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Australia, New Zealand. The fascination, and there's a reason why I mention this, is the multitude of different cultures and history, which I'm a little bit about. I love history.
Yeah.
I love meeting different people from different backgrounds and understanding, right? And again, for me, that has got to do with respect, right? Respecting where they have come from, respecting, and then trying to find, if it is not even in their own language, because they don't speak Mandarin, and my Bahasa is a bit there, but giving the people the feeling that you're really trying to understand them. You're not here to sell them something per se, right? You're here to find solutions. Sometimes the term or financial doctor is used. I don't like using it because I don't like going to the doctor.
Who does?
Or dentist, for that matter. It goes a very long way, right? If you just learn the very basics of saying hello and thank you.
Yeah.
Nothing builds more trust than the ability to converse in somebody's language.
Yeah, for sure.
And so as good as I can, I adapted to that. but it's then also your consistency, right? You can't turn up one day, right, telling this story or trying to, sell a glass of water, and tomorrow it has to be tea. First and foremost, your approach has to be holistic in nature. A word I don't like all that much, but it's very prescriptive, right?
Mm.
And before you actually start rendering advice, you have listened, and you've listened the majority of the time, right? Only then do you actually have a basis of coming up with solutions. And I think that's where the big difference lies. Unfortunately, in recent years, there had been a hell of a lot of pressure in the industry to emphasize far more on the immediate sale.
Yes.
That has some short-term benefits. It does bring you a nice positive impact, but it's short-lived.
Yes.
Again, in this people's business, it's all about long-term, multi-generational relationships.
I think one of the biggest dichotomies, unfortunately, in private banking is that most CEOs are not really being measured annually. It feels like sometimes it's quarterly, monthly. So the challenge is they're being measured for today whilst trying to aim for 5 years from now. Yeah. And that is very difficult. I'm just curious, in all your business building, when you've got a task, you're going to build the business, double AUM, triple AUM, where do you start? Do you sit down with a blank canvas and start to work out the pieces on the board? I'm just curious, what does that look like from behind your desk?
So again here, right, drawing from many, many amazing leaders that I had myself. And like in any, strategy or managerial tasks, you need to make sure, what is it that you want to achieve? So again, take a private bank. Who are we? What do we represent? What is our proposition? What is it that we bring to market? What is my market space? Who are the competitors? Who am I up against? What are their products, right? And then realistically find an answer that makes you unique, something that is very special. And all the platforms that I worked for, they had something that made them different than the other.
Yes.
I'm not saying better, I'm saying different, right? And really understanding that, and why will that have a benefit to you? Working with me on this platform that's unique in this. Now, there are very different models out there, from the very, very small boutique, nearly romantic history, all the way to the very, very large, universal, global players. Right?
Yeah.
And I always say there's enough sunshine for all of us. It is hugely competitive, but if you actually focus on your key competencies, right, and have the ability to share this with your customers, that is going to make it work. Now, of course, you also need to assemble the right teams. Nobody ever wins this on his alone, right? The old saying, if you want to go fast, you go by yourself. If you want to go far, you go with a team.
Yeah.
The satisfaction of victory in a team is also far greater than your individual glory.
For sure.
So where do I want to compete? What is my customer? What is my strategy? How am I going to capture it? How am I going to embrace this clientele that makes it different? And hope that they will be there for the long run and repeat. And who are the people that I need to help me do this?
And you sit down, listen, you've always assembled fantastic teams based on obviously who you know, but largely based on meritocracy, which is not that common, in our business. There's a lot of nepotism.
Yes and no. I think maybe nowadays much lesser than what one saw in the earlier days.
Yeah.
It really is qualifying on your own merits.
Yes.
I think we have come a very long way. Does that mean that you don't surround yourself with people who you trust, right? So I've worked with you for a long time. I come across a new opportunity. It's right for me. And then I reach out to you and say, hey, Paul, this is a story going forward. We've worked extremely well together. I think this will make sense for you to consider as well.
Right.
So yes, it has to be on merits, but working with people who you like and who you respect, there's nothing wrong with that.
No, 100%. So what have you done personally and professionally to optimize yourself in what is a very, very competitive landscape that's constantly evolving? I'm just curious, what has PK done to stay ahead of the game?
I think the number one success factor is my never-ending appetite to learn, right? A willingness to take a certain risk for my own professional career. And this is also the advice that I give to younger people, right? Be hungry.
Yeah.
Right? Learn something every single day.
Yeah.
It doesn't just have to be a technical aspect of a financial product. Learn something that is interesting to share in conversation. A lot of private banking conversations have become very boring, Paul. They're a carbon copy, one after the other, right? I come here and tell the same story as A and B and C and D. How can I elevate that conversation that it becomes far more meaningful? For you, it might be a conversation about wines. It might be about boxing. I know the film freak that you are, right?
Yeah.
Can I find topics that genuinely interest you?
Yes.
And derive the private banking aspect or angle from there?
Yeah.
Um,
And you know what you were saying earlier, by the way, where you showed genuine interest, because I remember there were a few things I'll just share with you. You may not even remember them. So the first time you came to dinner at my house, you brought some flowers for my wife and a bottle of wine for me, which I just thought, because it's not something that everyone does.
Yeah.
Then another time we had done a lot of work together and you invited me out for dinner. You took me to Senso. Unfortunately, the restaurant's closed down on Club Street. Great. We had a lovely meal. And the other thing that you did that is a very unusual thing. So we had a mutual dear friend who was the head of HR, and she had resigned from that organization, and I hadn't called her that day. And it'd only been a day, and it'd been a few hours since she'd resigned. But you called me, you said, you haven't called her. And I said, yeah, I was going to do so this evening. You said, make sure you do, because it's important that she knows you're thinking about her. And do you remember that?
I do, and because it's a very, very dear friend of ours.
Yes. And that had a major impact because, and I was going to call her later that evening, but the point is that you called me to let me know, don't forget to do this. And that relationship lasted for many, many years after that.
So I'm glad that you remember that. You see, again, it's that genuine care for individuals.
Yeah.
Honest relationships, right? And one thing I have learned over the years, whether in family or in business, don't miss that call.
Yeah.
Right? Don't miss that conversation. Sometimes it's too late.
Yes.
Right? So, look, and being Swiss, timeliness has a different meaning as well, right? Slightly tongue-in-cheek. Don't miss those moments.
Yeah.
They are the ones that you're remembered by.
Yeah, they do, because they escape us, right? Yes. But why that was so meaningful, because, you did it purely out of friendship for me and for that person. You got nothing from it. And it was a very important phone call.
Is it not, Paul? It's actually quite simple. Treat people the way that you would like to be treated.
Yeah.
Right? Reach out to individuals. Embrace them the way that you hope somebody will do the same.
Yeah. Actually, again, you won't know this. So this is going back 17.5 years, and you called me. And at the time, my son, who was born prematurely, he was in hospital for 3 months. And I was at the Paragon because he was at Mount Elizabeth. And at that point, he'd been in hospital for about 2.5 months. And it was a little bit touch and go. And I told you, and I was close to tears because I was just walking around because there was a period where I couldn't go into the NICU. And you called me and I told you. And you just said a few words of comfort. And then you called me back, I think maybe the next 3 days in a row, just to see if I was okay. Again, very small, because a lot of people send a WhatsApp or text back then, which is great. But, and I was living away from home. My parents were in a different country. So just that friendly phone call, it makes a huge difference.
Again, doing things that you would enjoy, right? There's somebody doing for you.
Yeah.
In families, we have these joyous moments. We have a bit the challenging moments, right? The joyous ones we like to share, right? I've got a newborn son. How wonderful is that, right? And then to congratulate somebody, the parents, and bring them a bunch of flowers, but also to be there, a shoulder to cry on, ears to listen when things are not all that good, right? Being far away from what used to be home, right, also influences. You are actually actively seeking that circle of friends, that circle of individuals where you can reach out if you need.
Yeah.
So these are very important aspects of life and go way beyond just business.
Now, if I may, I want for our younger audience members, I want to get some takeaways that you can impart in terms of your knowledge and wisdom for those guys that are coming up the ranks of private banking, because I feel there's a lot of people fall into two camps. There are those that are happy-go-lucky. They wait for a tap on the shoulder, which is fine. But then there are others that are very, very aggressive and, they're trying to race up the ladder. But what would your advice be to people that are coming up through the ranks?
So, most important, no one but you owns your career.
I love that.
It's as simple as that. Nobody's waiting for you. There's nothing that you will receive on a silver platter. And you can't expect your bosses to know what you want, right? So seek that conversation, express your aspirations. Hopefully you can actually articulate them. You'll be quite shocked, Paul, how few can actually articulate what they really want. Hence also that need for somebody to mentor and coach them. And is that really what you want? So make sure you own it yourself, you drive it yourself. You don't need to put out your elbows and hurt others to advance. All right? You have some that we have come across that shine on the demise of others.
Yes.
That's not the way to go.
Correct.
That's not sustainable. And in this ever-changing world, well, maybe I will report to that individual that I used my elbows on prior.
Yeah.
In private banking, maybe more general in life as well, it's all about making friends and not enemies, right? Create long-lasting relationships. So coming back to the question for the youngsters, and I do feel it's much tougher for them than it was 30, 40 years ago, right? It's so competitive. The need for grades, university grades, right? Just to make the first cut. I told you, I would most probably not get a job.
Me too.
Today.
Yeah.
So the selection criteria is far, far tougher. Different in different parts of the world. But if I look here at Singapore, it's very, very nuanced, right? Yeah.
And it's global, the competition now, right?
Yes. That then comes on top, right? The global mobility. So all of a sudden, the pool of candidates is not just in your backyard.
Yeah.
It's actually across. So how do I actually submit a CV, right, that catches your attention? Because they all look the same. I actually look for things that are different, right? Not all that uniform stuff.
Yeah.
Your golden opportunity is at that interview. You remember way back then when I had my first conversation at that Swiss bank in London?
Yes.
That most probably could have turned out very differently. And maybe I would never have come to Asia. So seize the opportunity in those conversations. Be clear. Show your passion. Show the clarity of your thoughts and minds.
Yeah.
And if you don't have it yet, don't be shy to ask for help. Whether that's a senior, an official coach, an old teacher, an old friend.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you feel a lot of people are too proud to do that?
There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
Right? Globally, and especially in the financial world, more broadly, in private banking in particular. There's a lot of pride in it, right?
Yeah.
Very often leading them to making the mistake of not asking or not admitting that I don't understand. Some of the stuff that we do is highly complex, right? the product innovation, the solutions that we see, I'm not shy to say, look, I don't quite understand this. Can you please explain?
Yeah.
It's a little bit cultural as well.
Yes.
Right? The face issue. Maybe the Western and the European, they are a bit more upright in questioning and all. Here, we don't like to admit that we don't know. It's also got to do then with respect thy elder and the entire face issue.
Yeah.
But I always say, and that's also the way that I raise my children, the only stupid question is the one that you don't ask.
Beautiful.
The worst attitude is to pretend that you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting because I was saying to my kids yesterday, we had a chat in the evening, and I just said, look, it's okay to hate to lose, but you can't be afraid to lose because that's how we all learn. That's the reality.
Look, having a winning mentality, nothing's wrong with it. On the contrary.
Yes.
It's great fun to win. Right?
100%.
But you can't win all the time.
Yeah.
And then in defeat, in exclamation marks, take it in your stride, right? How do I recover from being knocked down? How do I stand up again after something adverse has happened?
Yeah.
I cannot count the number of mistakes I made throughout my career, right? And there would have been many, smaller ones, bigger ones, but the way that you are measured, and most importantly, you measure yourself, how do I respond to it? How do I get up and walk on?
Yeah. It's interesting because I think a lot of people don't really diagnostically analyze why they failed, but also why they've won. Because sometimes if you don't know how to replicate that. So I use the analogy, say we're driving from here to Marine Parade and we're coming from the CBD and you go, I'm going to go Nicole Highway. Let's pretend there's a traffic jam. Okay, I'm going to go ECP. How does that work? And I just find a lot of people don't have that thought process. And sometimes maybe you've lucked out, you've fluked it, but they can't replicate it, you know?
You see, also there are lots of learnings throughout the many, many years, right? And it basically comes to, don't be afraid to fail, right? If you do so quickly, right? And adapt. Only fools repeat over and over again, right? And we all know the outcome of that. Have the courage to try something different. It didn't work this way. Well, it might work that way. And by the way, that also might not work, right?
Well, look at your career and how much private banking's evolved, you know, particularly in Singapore. You have to adapt. You have to stay relevant. You've got to stay ahead of the game. It's not easy. What about sales? I'm curious because for me, sales is often in our industry or in most industries, it's a dirty word. But the reality is we're all salespeople in one way, shape or form. What can you share that you've seen top private bankers do or banks do to help the journey of a salesperson?
So first and foremost, Paul, it's a fantastic word.
Yeah, agreed.
It's a lovely word. And it's a great activity. And concluding a sale brings a lot of joy. Now, you have to make sure that that sale is done in the proper way.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, client first, right? Really understanding entire aspects. Also then fairly, openly, transparently describe what potential risks come with it. Well, don't sell for the sake of selling. That's not fun.
Yeah.
And it's very short-lived. The entire industry has come under severe pressure because it was sales for the sake of sales, right? We go back to 97, 98, right? Where we really didn't do the right thing for clients. Selling products to elderly ladies, our grandmas, right? Suggesting it's the same as a saving booklet. That's not a sale, Paul. That's cheating.
Yeah.
Not surprising, then the regulator rightfully clamped down very heavily and created a framework. Again, here in Singapore, together with the industry, actually finding then the best answers, right? Where today you have your investment suitability standards, etc., your transparency. Yes, you need to be careful that through sales, you don't generate a lopsided benefit for the salesperson. In our industry, it's called the bonus, right? Don't try to optimize yours on the back of someone else.
Yeah.
First and foremost, it will be short-lived. the clients will hate you and not do business with you, and the regulator and your employer will have one or two things to say. Very simple guidance. Do the right thing even when nobody's watching.
Yeah.
Well, and so that counts for sales as well. But no, sales is a good word.
It
right?
is.
It's a lovely activity.
What did the banks do? But I'm just curious because obviously I've serviced the banks, but I've never worked in one. But say I'm a banker right now, and if I come to you and I say, look, I want to enhance my sales skills. I'm an introvert. I'm very good with the markets and the product knowledge. Typically most of the banks, will they have a system in place? How does it evolve?
Yeah. So first and foremost, nobody commands all skills to cover the whole aspects in entirety, right?
Yeah.
So again, reaching out to colleagues and friends that are there to help you. Now, yes, you do need to know the technical skills, the technical aspects of what you want to sell.
Yeah.
But how am I actually more effective? And there are many courses that one can take, right?
Yeah.
Whether these are sales techniques, how do I overcome pushbacks, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But most probably the best way to do a sale is believe in it yourself.
Yeah.
If I believe in the product, I believe in its benefit, I'm self-confident, then most probably I'm going to win this.
Yes.
If I'm hesitating, if I am... I have seen many types, right? The client will specifically ask you, especially, Philip, what do you think, right? And then you need to have a very honest answer.
Yeah.
And share your opinion. Many will turn around and say, Papa, they're all good, right? The blue, the red, the yellow, actually, but maybe you take a third each.
Yeah.
That often is actually not the right answer. Paul, blue is an ideal color. It matches your eyes. No, it doesn't. This is what I truly believe is the best choice for you. That's how you make this is how you become the trusted advisor.
Yeah.
Right? Have the courage. Yes, you have rules and regulations within your firm's policies, right, where you have to stipulate the house view, right? And your personal view, if so asked. But you also need to make very clear that the client knows which is which.
Mm.
And to be truthful, in my 42 years, very seldom did I have an idea that was different than the so-called house view. Right?
Yeah.
There are nuances. Huh? And because I know you intimately well, personalize for you. That then makes it a happy and a good sale.
I'll tell you a quick funny one. So when we started working together, without mentioning the name of the person or the bank, the head of HR had arranged for me to meet the CEO, and he said, "You're very, very young." And it wasn't a compliment.
I know who the gentleman is that you're referring to.
And we became great friends in the end. But so he looked me up and down, and he said, "I'm going to ask you a question, and if you don't answer it well, it's the end of the meeting." Yeah. And the two HR ladies in the meeting room were a little bit worried, like this is going to go pear-shaped. And I said, "No problem." And he said, "Well, how do you deal with, what's your definition of success?" And I said, "Well, that's easy. It's how high you bounce once you reach rock bottom."
Nice.
And unfortunately, I think you might be there right now because I had some problems in the business. And then he started laughing and he said, "Well, how do you deal with mistakes?" And I said, "I thought it was just one question." He said, "You've got your retainer. It's just out of curiosity." And he was an ex-risk practitioner. I said, "Zero tolerance, baby." And then I smiled. But that was a test in the moment, right?
I am so happy you actually bring that up, right? What is your tolerance level?
Yeah.
And when it comes to rules and regulations, behavior, your starting point has to be zero tolerance. Let me give you an example. So again, we both like cars. So we're driving fast on the motorway where we're allowed to.
Yeah.
I can be as focused and careful as I want to be, right? That mindset, I don't want to make an accident. I don't want to... The one thing I cannot influence is dust particles making little scratches on my car, right? If I don't have that zero tolerance, that focused mindset, at the speed at which I'm going, I will have a crash. And mostly, that is lethal.
Yeah.
I can paintbrush the scratches on my car from the dust particulates, right? And so again, very simple analogies in your working environment.
Yeah.
If I don't have a zero tolerance, then, well, is 1%, 2%, or why not? You need to set those limits. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't take any risk at all.
Yeah.
Right? You do need to, and that's partially also answering your question before, when you set your strategies, right? What risks do I want to run within the framework of the allowed to actually achieve what I want to achieve?
Yeah.
There is no such thing as risk-free.
No.
Life, sports, business. There's no such thing.
Yeah.
In order to enjoy success, understand those risks, how to mitigate. One of my favorite sayings, what do you believe makes F1 drivers go fast?
Go for it. I don't.
Brakes. They have the confidence and the
Brilliant.
Knowledge. This car will stop where I need it to stop.
Yes.
Right? So I can come out of 360 per hour into a corner where I know the car will slow down and help me safely through until I can accelerate again.
Yeah.
Brakes make you go faster. Most often when I call this for the first time, people think,
No.
this guy is now getting senile and too old for it.
No.
Speak to the F1 drivers, which I've actually had the privilege of doing, right? That's exactly. They are not out there to kill themselves.
Yeah.
They know the risks and they know how the risks are mitigated.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that there won't be any accidents at all. You can see every weekend there's one or the other who goes off, right?
Yeah. So interesting.
Know your risks.
Spot on.
Mitigate them.
Now, given that you've been working, in our industry for such a long time, as you move through to the next chapter, talk to me a little bit about growth. How do you see private banking evolving? Because with AI, the regulatory framework changing, our industry is changing and evolving, rapidly.
Absolutely. First thing is technology, or AI as we call it today, is your friend. Embrace it.
Yep.
Learn as much as you can because it's not going to go away. The train is already leaving the station and you need to be on this train or you will be left behind. But machines, again, for a lack of better word, will be here to do far better than human beings ever will, repetitive, mundane things, freeing up time for you as a private banker to spend more time with your clients.
Yeah.
Right? Understand them better. Don't fear, embrace. It was the same when the internet came. It was the same, right? Way back then. You will not believe it. When I first started as an apprentice, the entire office had one screen. And it had those, you remember it was this a grayish with a green color.
Of course.
Right? The games that you could play was this boring tennis. Right?
Yeah, I remember.
Look at where this has evolved to. It is very important to embrace this. You take, for example, portfolio build, right? I used to do this by hand on a piece of paper. Then we started to be given simulation tools, but it still took you hours. Today, there are already these highly sophisticated tools in place that actually, within the shortest period of time, I will actually get a very, very solid investment proposal that I can share with you.
Yeah.
Way beyond the days of pencil selling. Again, a term that most people actually don't.
Yeah.
So here you are in a sales meeting.
Yes.
Your piece of paper is upside down.
Yeah.
And you actually then draw a portfolio build, right? You have your asset classes, you have your currency. You do this all by hand.
Yeah.
And it's turned upside down so the client can see it.
Yes.
How much time did we actually waste on that?
Yeah.
Right? Today, press of a button, you will get it. And so and it's not going to go backwards, it's going to get. Machines will never replace the human element in our business.
No.
And it's still a very long way out until, even with AI, they can come up with another aspect of our business that's very dear to my heart, trust solutions.
Yes.
I can do portfolios, algorithms, goodness knows what, right? how do I have a machine compassionately telling you about your next generation?
Yeah.
The legacy that you want to leave for your families, your loved ones. What is it that you, with the monies that you have earned, want to leave behind?
Yeah.
That human touch most probably is going to be with us for a very, very long time. And ultimately, Paul, that is the Olymp of private banking. That's where it all comes together, where together we create a family charter for the days where we're no longer here. We keep the money together for the benefit of the family and the designated purpose.
Yeah.
So that will still be in the hands of humans, the hearts of humans, for quite some time to come. Let the machines do the other stuff.
Yeah. As you said, embrace it. Well, PK, it's been an absolute pleasure. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover?
Just say thank you for what was a lovely conversation. Everybody out there, best of luck in your careers, in your lives. Pursue your love, your passion with exactly that, with passion, dedication.
Beautifully ended. Philip, appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.